Welcome, everyone. Good evening, good morning. Welcome to our Asia Pacific 2024 Payments Megatrends webinar. My name is Lindsay Lear. I am the Managing Director of Payments and Commerce Market Intelligence, and this marks our third session in a full-on 3-session series on payment megatrends around the world. So if you've joined us for previous sessions, you've made it to the end. Congratulations. And if you're new here, welcome. I'm very excited to host this session for you and introduce momentarily our fantastic speakers who will take us through the content of this fascinating region. We are hoping to deliver a lot of rich data and insights for you to help you understand and expect and get a sense of what we see coming this year in 2024 with respect to payments and fintech in the Asia Pacific region. Okay, so a couple of just quick announcements before we dive into our content. Remember, you can ask questions at the bottom of the panel. We'll be answering those questions throughout the webinar. And rest assured, this is a very dense, rich document. You will receive a copy of it at the take screenshots or copious notes. Just enjoy the speakers, and you'll get the full document later on in a couple of days. Okay. So moving ahead, just a very quick legal notice for all of you. As you do in any sort of session, make sure you're taking this information in combination with many other sources and always practicing sound business practices. And as we go ahead, a brief intro onto PCMI. If you're new to PCMI, welcome. We're thrilled that you're here. We are a market intelligence agency dedicated to helping companies around the world understand what's going on in the payments industry. We've been at this for over 30 years. I myself have been razor focused on the payments industry for the past 10 years. And we're all about gathering data, making sense of that data, and helping you make the best decisions and formulate the best strategy possible. Okay, going ahead, just to give you a very quick view of where we're located. Some of you may know us as being very deeply experienced in the Americas. In the past several years, we have expanded beyond Latin America and now have teams sitting in 13 cities around the world. And you're about to meet some of them today to take us through the trends we're observing in the APAC region. Just one more slide on PCMI so you can get a good sense of what we do. We are very passionate about payments, and this type of event is part of our thought leadership strategy in which we're engaging our network, sharing what we're learning, sharing insights, and contributing to a rich data-based strategic planning for companies around the world. Beyond that, we help you make opportunity is most attractive for you to invest in, understand which company to acquire or partner with, understand how to pivot in this industry that's constantly being changed by technology, by regulation, and consumer behavior. So these are just some of the examples of how we work with clients. So keep that in mind. But for now, just enjoy the content that we have for you today. All right, so let's go ahead and introduce our speakers today. Again, we'll be joined by 3 esteemed gentlemen, very expert in their respective regions. And we'll start with Tonette. Welcome, Tonette. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. I'm Tonette Santana.
We've got Mahesh joining us.
Oh. Go ahead, sorry. No, I was going to say I'm Tonette Santana. I'm from the Philippines. I'm an Asia Pacific person. I'm based in New York right now, so I'm happy to be with you here, guys, today.
And Mahesh, tell us about yourself.
Hi, guys. Yeah, by the name, you should have figured it out. I'm based in India. I'm excited about working with PCMI over the last 2 years and looking forward for this webinar.
Fantastic. And Ignacio.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you, everyone, for this space. The 3 webinar of a marathon of 3 series with hundreds of people around the world. I'm Ignacio. I've been working in alternative finance for 15 years so far. I'm based in Melbourne, Australia. So happy to be here.
Well, let's go ahead, and I'm just going to kick us off. So you guys, with just setting a little bit of the context. As I mentioned, this is the 3rd session in a 3-session series. And so it's always helpful to put things a little on the global context, right? And just to start us off, I always love looking at payment methods. Payment methods help give us a sense of where this market is compared to other regions, how advanced it is, how deeply penetrated it is in terms of digitization. And so here we can see the share of e-commerce payment volume right? According to FIS and a little bit of PCMI analysis there. And when we look at the APAC region, this is how e-commerce volume is breaking down by payment method. And we can see huge dominance from wallets. Now, these numbers are going to be a little bit biased thanks to the size in China. But nevertheless, as something that we'll see very prominently in the region is the strength of wallets. So we don't want to underestimate that, even though China is definitely pulling that number up. And so the strength and sophistication of alternative payment methods in the region is certainly a trend and a theme we're going to touch on at various points throughout the session. Okay, if we move ahead. This goes into a little bit more depth here, right? Looking again at e-commerce payment methods around APAC, comparing 2022 to 2026. And again, we see that digital wallet share increasing. Not only are they dominant, but they're increasing in share, while we see credit and debit cards losing share over time. This is a trend we've seen across the world and is probably most prominent in the APAC region. Now, wallets, of course, are very, there's many types of wallets. They can be very varied. We have everything from pass-through tokenized wallets to staged wallets. And we will see several examples of them throughout the webinar, but that mobile-first nature of payments in APAC is very prominent. Okay, let's go ahead. And then what's happening at the POS? Similar trend. We do see cards maintaining their share a little bit stronger, right? Around 20% in 2022. And we look at credit cards, still losing share in favor of digital wallets, but not as rapidly and not as drastically as in the online channel. But again, QR code based wallets and P2P style payments have become central to daily life in Asia Pacific region, varying by country, and we're going to take a look at that now. So that's a very quick overview in terms of payment methods, but I want to turn it over to Tonette now to really give us a tour around the APAC region and give us a flavor of what's going on in this massive and hugely diverse region.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm your tour guide for the day, guys. You know, there's really no such thing as a generic Asia-Pacific story. Each country in Asia is distinct, its own heritage, its own culture, own patterns of behavior, and even its own economic standing in the world. However, there's always some benefit in trying to put some of these countries into some clusters to see some differences and similarities, sometimes to understand the patterns, oftentimes to appreciate the differences. Starting from the left and going counterclockwise, we'll go China and India. More than 1 billion population merits its own category as giants. They are strong economies. They affect the world. Anything you do in China and India affects everybody. And it's a target company of every company in the world. Everyone keeps an eye out on these two giants. If you go down to Southeast Asia, they're considered the economic stars of Asia right now and in the world. Technology advancement, rapidly digitized consumers. They were all cash kind of countries before, but now they're rapidly digitizing. So you see a lot of technology enhancements happening there. And then if you go to the right, the top of the right, Hong Kong and Singapore, they are the treasury centers, very liberal currency regulations, a lot of money movements. Most of the Fortune 500 companies keep their liquidity in these two countries. So obviously there's a lot of interest in these two countries, together with their very small but very developed and highly industrialized populations. And as you go down, Japan and Korea, they're their own category. They're financially mature markets. A lot of them have real-time systems going back decades. They're not talking of years. They're going back decades with heavily developed systems. And you will see in the next slide why we look at Japan and Korea in a very distinct way, because sometimes their behavior doesn't really mirror everyone else in Asia Pacific. And lastly, as we go down, and I hate saying lastly because it feels like they're down, but they're down under Australia and New Zealand, the Pacific, very distant from everyone else, but still they managed to create their own pockets of niche offerings due to the behavior of their consumers and the particular behavior of the economies. So again, that's a very quick tour of Asia Pacific. If we go down to the next slide, I'll talk to you about each of these clusters. Hong Kong and Singapore, very dear to my heart. I personally spent 10 years in Hong Kong. They're very unique countries because, again, they carry the liquidity of a lot of Fortune 500 companies. Citizens very affluent with card and bank penetration extremely high. Cash continues its rapid decline in these two countries. You will see on the graph, though, the big growth of digital wallets, with the hit mostly being on cash. However, some of the trends are interesting to point out. In e-commerce, for example, debit cards are increasing while credit card usage is still slightly declining in both countries, right? It's a very interesting trend, and we have to really delve into that, why that's happening. In contrast, at point of sale, there is an increase in credit card market share in both countries, while debit is declining sharply in Hong Kong, for example, probably buoyed by the use of octopus stored value cards in Hong Kong, which can be linked with auto top-ups on bank accounts. For many of you who have been to Hong Kong, you will notice that Hong Kong has this octopus card similar to the Oyster card in UK, and it's extremely strong stored value card that is used not just for purchasing, but is used for entering buildings and is used for transportation. So again, because of this particular power of this stored value card, the trends there are not specifically the same as every country in the world. A little point of note here that in Singapore, there are more than 20 digital wallets with their own QR codes that are utilized by citizens when paying for smaller purchases and smaller merchants. Lindsay and I have our own experience of trying to buy small ticket items there and being met with a digital wallet or cash only option. That's the only way to pay, digital wallet or cash. This is an interesting trend that we will keep an eye on as we see this in more and more markets in Asia Pacific. Going to the next slide, the giants, China and India, 1 billion consumers again. Just absorb that, folks. 1 billion consumers in each of these two countries. The story of digital wallets, if we start with China, is unparalleled. I think Lindsay teed it up at the start. Alipay and WeChat were the leaders in terms of market share, and they're the leaders with a whopping 81% of e-commerce transactions. 81%, above the norm in the rest of the region and the rest of the world. Extremely powerful embedded experiences. That's what they bring. The Alipay and the WeChats are not simple mobile wallets. If you delve down into these two companies, they are full embedded experience. They're like the Facebooks, they're like the Amazons, they're like the WhatsApps of the world, together with payments. So that's why their strength is extremely strong. Now, if you go to India, the wallets are also used, but if you go to the background, they are using UPI. And UPI, I think most of us are aware that UPI is this large account-to-account transfer real-time payment system in India, which has just taken the world by storm. In 2022, UPI transactions were 50% of the entire global flow for RTP transactions. Just absorb that amount, right? So it's a very large amount in terms of, only probably second, the second closest is Pix in Brazil. But again, UPI is such a leader in this space. So if you look at China and India, two large populations with two different payment types supporting the transactions, very interesting. One last interesting note, though, is that China and India have not stopped in domestic shores with both Alipay and UPI. They're continuing to extend their reach towards other countries, especially to support their travelers from their own countries traveling abroad. Alipay has been partnering with countries all over the world, and so is UPI, so that when someone from China or someone from India travels to other parts of the world, they can still use their same China Alipay and their still India UPI without having to go for new schemes. Again, this is a trend not just with these two countries, but in a lot of different countries and a lot of different mobile providers that we will take a look at and see more and more as we go through this presentation. Let me now turn my eyes towards, Japan and Korea. These two countries, special and unique. As far as digital is concerned, cards remain the dominant mode of payment. Though the trends in Japan and Korea are a bit in the opposite direction, with Japan increasing in card transactions and Korea slightly decreasing in card transactions. Still, if you look at the graphs, these two countries, compared to the rest of Asia, card penetration is extremely high. One footnote to the right, you will see that cash still very high in Japan due to its aging population. Again, that's a heavy cost burden on all the participants handling cash. And Another footnote I wanted to bring up is on Korea. Well, though card penetration is extremely high in both e-com and POS, mobile wallets are slowly coming in, right? There is a mobile wallet in Korea called Kakao Pay, and you will see the stat there, quite astonishing. 3 out of 4 South Koreans have a Kakao Pay account. And they use this account for chatting, they use this account for payments, they use this account for cryptocurrency, they use this account for mobile acceptance now because Kakao Pay has partnered with Alipay also and with GCash in the Philippines, so that a Kakao Pay user, when traveling abroad, same exact pattern that we saw for India and China, when they travel abroad, still use the same platform and the same mobile app. So again, even with these 2 slides, we're already seeing a pattern of using the same platform that I'm used to as a local when I'm traveling abroad. And that's an interesting pattern that we see. If we go now to my home turf, Southeast Asia, Southeast Asia block of Singapore, Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Thailand, rising tigers of e-commerce. If you look at the growth of e-commerce in this region, it's so large, even larger than the bigger giants in terms of annual growth rate. It's no surprise that super apps, mobile wallets dominate in this Southeast Asian region. But a more exciting trend that we will talk about in the next coming slides is really the bilateral connections between the RTP systems of these 2 countries that have been launching in recent years since 2021. Cross-border travel between Southeast Asia is very strong. For most of us who live in Southeast Asia, we know that we can travel to each of these countries without a visa because they're trying to promote e-commerce between these 2 countries. And we will delve down deeper into the trend of bilateral connections in our coming slides. But I also wanted to share a little fun fact for all of you, that Southeast Asian countries, these 6, together with Brunei, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and East Timor, we have our own athletic games, the Southeast Asian Games, started in 1959. Yep. We get together and do our own athletic games every 2 years just to make sure that we foster camaraderie and foster commerce. And that's no surprise why the Southeast Asian bloc considers their own bloc as strong. All right. We now go to Australia and New Zealand, commonly called the Pacific. These 2 nations have consumers heavily banked, heavily carded. Interesting note is the high penetration of buy now, pay later in these 2 countries, especially Australia, mostly spurred on by the COVID pandemic. There were a lot of different reasons why Australia saw a large uptick in BNPL. It could be a lure of bulk purchases. We know that a lot of people in Australia, when they're presented with a bulk purchase, and then you can now do a layaway plan, that's very attractive. But more than just that, there was a lot of data showing that young people use this for essential medications and even dental care that can be very expensive in these 2 countries, to be able to do a layaway plan to do dental care that is massively expensive. So if you look at statistics, 40% of people aged 18 to 19 have BNP loans. That's extremely high. So again, what is the trend there? There's BNPL. However, you will see in the second trend that regulators are now starting to clamp down on this and make sure that there's enough control over this. Unfortunately, what does control mean? Control means usually costs for the providers. And studies have shown and reports have shown that there's really not a lot of profitability for these BNPL providers in the last several years. In fact, it's very worrying because some companies like Latitude Pay, Affirm, even locally based OpenPay ceased operations in Australia in 2023 due to profitability and growing concerns. So again, we see a great trend for BNPL, but at the same time, we have to proceed with caution and take a look at who is really making money, which again is a theme throughout all our presentation in terms of where are the trends going, who is making money, and how will they make money to be able to survive. So that was like a quick tour. That's like your bus tour of Asia Pacific. I just went through that. So again, very diverse region, very rich. And so we go to the next slide. on this particular section, we'd like to go a little deeper, right? A little deeper into some of these trends. As we know, real-time payments or account-to-account payments are really the big thing around the world, not just Asia, right? If you look at 2022, 4 Asia-Pac markets were in the top 5 of global RTP markets. PromptPay, if you look at PromptPay, introduced in 2018, and in 2022 represented 35% of transactions. That's like 4 years to get 1/3 of the market share in Thailand. We haven't even put there UPI, which is like 50% of the market for globally for 2022. And if you look at 2027, the potential for RTP is so huge, right? Sometimes when you look at the UPI projections, it even boggles the mind, right? You're talking of 1 billion daily transactions by 2027. Like, how does that even possible with 1 billion transactions? And if you look at the right side, you will see how dominant UPI is in India in 2022 and 2023 in terms of their value compared to the cards, right? So again, RTPs led by India has taken over Asia Pacific. Not to say that mobile wallets are not strong, because as we mentioned a while ago, in China, it's very strong. But again, this is a big trend that we're seeing. And I'm now going to pass it over, as I talk about and hail India, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague and partner in India, Mahesh, who will lead us, tell us a little bit more about India. Mahesh?
Thank you, Tonat. You set the ground predominantly on how UPI is being a success story, thanks to you. And continuing on that, you can see in the chart there, I mean, last I checked, there was close to 400 million transactions per day as early as last month. So we are looking at, as Torat mentioned, we are inching slowly and steadily towards $1 billion in 2026-27, which is the reason behind is predominantly led by government policies, sustained innovative solutions by NPCI that runs UPI, and partnerships. And looking at the 3 top trends, as rightly mentioned by Tonat earlier, this is a community which has a lot of expats. So not just travelers, you can see the money coming back to India. So India is the top leader in the remittances market. So if you are a payment cross-border provider, you should be having a very careful look at what India's going to utilize UPI for the cross-border remittances going forward. And the case is similar, owing to RTP adoption, apart from India, predominantly the APAC countries like China and Vietnam has seen a huge rise in the A2A marketplace. And with the new technologies comes with new regulatory norms. This was the hot topic that happened in India last month with RBI cracking down on Paytm. So this is going to be a trend. And the similar case with BNPL, we are going to see with wallets, there are going to be stricter norms, KYC, and compliances. Can we go on to the next slide, please? Yeah, in spite of the rise in RTP, which is considered the next big thing in APAC, the wallets rally continue in many of these markets just because of the reason of super apps, because they wanted to get the connected experience to the end consumer. They don't want the consumer to switch between wallets and everything like that. So as you can see, the share of wallets continue to grow at a very good pace, both from Thailand, China, and Philippines, right from 2018. And a recent study by WorldPay expects close to 60% of e-commerce payments to be made by digital or mobile wallets. So if you are a card company, you are looking at close to 16 to 20% in the next 2-3 years. So that's giving you a sense of how big the wallet market is. And more so in for example, as earlier mentioned, in a country like Philippines, you wouldn't be surprised if a merchant accepts only Gcash or only cash, and they would probably go do a hard no if you're trying to do a transaction over credit card. So that's how big the wallet market is in APAC. Can we get the next slide, please? Yeah, the funding sources. As we speak, how big the wallet is, we should also take a look at where are they getting funded with. So the dominance of wallets has not stopped from tapping into the traditional funding sources. That is predominantly the bank accounts or the cards, and they wanted to give you the full embedded experience. So predominantly in the APAC market is either OTC cash or wallet transactions. And as you are aware of how UPI and Gcash is doing, they're expanding the pie. They're trying to add in credit card as their funding sources. It has already started, initiated 2 years back by RuPay in India, and that is also happening with Gcash. So this wallet market is a kind of a crowded place in most of these countries, and they prefer to have zero reason for a consumer to not use their wallet. So they wanted to have the consumer stickiness and remain in the wallet. So they bring in more innovative solutions within the wallet space. So this is something interesting that is see how it is going to pan out in the next 2-3 years. I'll hand it over back to you, Tony.
Thanks, Mahesh. We're next going to talk about cross-border and global money movement, because again, this is a big trend. But before we go to that, we wanted to take like a short break to really just, hear from you in terms of like what you're looking at, in terms of how do we best communicate with you. And we have like a short poll. I hope you guys love polls, and I'll just read them through. So really the first one is, how would you like to connect with us? And then, the choices are, I have a concrete market intelligence need. Please contact me to discuss. The second one is, I'm interested in learning more about PCMI and your services. Please contact me for an informal conversation. The third one is, I would like to discuss these trends more in depth and meet PCMI senior leadership. Please contact me to schedule an informal chat. And the last one is, things are still brewing. Please contact me next quarter. Again, every answer is perfect. Every answer is, accepted. We'd love to be able to speak with all of you, right? And really do this discussion, as Lindsay had mentioned at the start of this webinar. It's all about trying to make things happen for you and trying to give you intelligence to make you the right decisions, enable you to make the right decisions. So again, we'll give it a bit more time as we look at your responses. Yeah, we're getting there. We're at nearly 100% now. 37%. All right, we'll proceed now, guys. We talked about this a while ago when I was talking about China, India, and the Southeast Asia bloc. The bilateral developments for these two countries, for these several countries in Southeast Asia, is extremely interesting. At the start, a lot of these regulators was talking about helping remittances, but we've seen that there's a lot of interest in cross-border travel as well, that enables citizens from each of these countries to go to one another's countries and utilize their own local payment scheme. So the first one is Singapore and Thailand, 2021, wherein the two real-time payment schemes were connected together. A live foreign exchange rate was being shown. And again, as we look on the left side, there's more and more linkages coming up, with the latest one being Malaysia and Singapore, which went live in November 2023. I was extremely lucky to be in Singapore in January to be able to witness this linkage firsthand. And I have a short video that I made. Sorry for my very amateur video skills, but I'll show you this video. It's a minute. It gives you a welcome music break as well, but I think it will help you really understand how powerful this thing is. Everyone talks about real-time cross-border transfer, real-time payment transfer. I want you to see it for yourselves. So let's play the video. So I hope that gave you like a real concrete feel of this cross-border real-time payment transfer happening in less than 30 seconds. So I'd like to turn it over now to Dr. Ignacio, our resident doctor in the company, to lead you to the next 3 slides. Nacho?
Thank you, Tonet. Well, yeah, I think that you showcase the feeling of having real-time cross-border payments very well with your video. And as you mentioned, the cross-border payment landscape is changing fast all over the world. Just to give you all of you an idea, the numbers say that it is expected to grow in a global level more than 50% for 2030. But particularly consumer cross-border payments and B2B cross-border payments markets are expected to grow much faster. In fact, B2B e-commerce cross-border payments are expected to grow more than 100% in the following 5 years. So market players and global money rails are changing all around the world, and there are several global trends shaping the future of cross-border payments. We have spoken about them in other webinars in these 3 series, but among these global trends, some of them have particularly relevance around Asia and the Pacific. And one of those is of course the internationalization of the RTPs or IPS, but in specific the multilateral cross-border networks. And Project Nexus is a massive example of that trend in APAC. So what is Project Nexus? It is a multilateral cross-border network that was developed by the BIS Innovation Hubs in Singapore. It was inspired by the huge success of the linkage between Singapore's Pay Now and Thailand's Prompt Pay that Tonet was speaking before. It came to solve a concrete pain point. Just to give you an idea, there are more than 60 instant payment systems or RTPs around the world. Imagine trying to connect domestic systems bilaterally with other countries. It will not only be very expensive and complex, but also it will generate an exponential number of deals and links. So the Project Nexus tried to solve that pain point. It is a standardized and multilateral network that was designed to accommodate many different IPS and RTPs between national systems. It started with phase 1 and phase 2, and it successfully linked Eurosystem, Malaysia, and Singapore. But right now, during this year, they are working in partnering with the South Asia cluster, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. And you might imagine that this is very relevant, not only for these countries, of course, because they have a lot of remittances and a lot of cross-border commerce, but also for the whole region. So the question will be, what does Nexus mean for the future of payments in APAC? If we go to the next slide, please. We like to present 3 potential and direct impacts that we see in Project Nexus and in a wider way of thinking about this in the multilateral cross-border networks for the region. So the first one is, of course, the disruption of traditional players. I mean, in concrete, the Nexus will present challenges for banks, for MTOs, and even for the fintechs in the cross-border space, because it will lower the margins, or because the players will, some of them will become irrelevant. So the question here is, how will these players react and transform themselves if this start to work? And sorry, I didn't say it, it was in the slide, but the BIS is working with this market during this year, but it is supposed to be launched in 2025. Secondly, and the big question is, who earns on FX? We all know that the cross-border and remittances space is a business of fees and FX. So the question here is, who takes the FX and which entities will be involved? In our opinion, this will for sure have a direct impact in threshold groups of banking institutions who rely part of their revenue, a relevant part of their revenue in FX. And finally, the whole digital ecosystem will be for sure transformed with cross-border commerce and cross-border e-commerce in particularly, as I said before. It will increase, that for sure. And the question here is, what will happen with the digital wallets and the cards that are being used today? And this question is open. We receive plenty of questions about which is the future of cards and digital wallets in APAC and also in Latin America, where PIX is growing very fast and all around the world. But this question is still open. We invite you all, of course, to think about which will be the impact of cards and digital wallets in this scenario. If we go to the next slide, another global trend that will have particular importance in APAC are the CBDCs. As you know, governments all around the world are designing their own central bank digital currencies. There are approximately 130, I think that today there are 132 countries that are working at some level in CBDCs. That represents more than 98% of the global GDP. Even if they are exploring, piloting, or they have already launched their CBDCs. However, among these 130 countries, only 11 of those have fully launched CBDC, and 10 of those 11 are in Latin America and the Caribbean. So you might think something like, well, so APAC is very, very far away. Well, let me tell you that that's not true, because APAC is the region with the most active CBDCs pilot worldwide. I know that you know about the China's pilot that have recently reached more than 260 million people and is being tested in several scenarios. And I know that you have also heard and listened about the Rupee pilot in India. But those are retail CBDCs that will for sure have an impact in the wholesale and cross-border space. But in terms of cross-border payments, the most wholesale and cross-border CBDCs projects are also concentrated in this region. So I can speak for hours about CBDCs. In fact, last December, we published a full report of more than 40 pages about CBDCs all around the world and its implications for the payments ecosystem. We will share it with you all in the chat right now. But to summarize, among the several trends that we identify in the cross-border space, multilateral connections of RTPs and wholesale CBDCs are specifically very, very relevant for Asia and the Pacific. You're
all right. Yeah, all right. So thanks a lot, Nacho. We'll go to our last deep dive in terms of obviously financial inclusion, a very dear topic for us here in Asia Pacific. As we know, in a lot of countries, this has been a big topic. I'll turn it over to Mahesh to talk about financial inclusion. Mahesh?
Yeah. Thanks, Doc, and thanks, Donit. Financial inclusion is a huge thing in APAC, and the rightly underserved, underbanked markets look up to financial inclusion, and payments industries plays a huge role in supporting this growth. And they come up with, develop solutions that include financial inclusion, including access of credit to all these underserved markets. And Vietnam which has been considerably a huge cash-heavy country. You can see the stats there. They have a recent adoption of QR codes, both by consumers and merchants. And what it translates is they bring them into the financial inclusion. They start opening their accounts. They get access to credit. So that has a huge incentive, both for the players as well as for the government. Just to throw you some numbers, 77% of adults now hold and have access to financial services. Before COVID, it was as low as 31%. So in last 3 years, you could see a huge shift how a wallet-based society can have an impact in the underserved and underprivileged market. And looking at the number of POS machines and what the government estimates is they are now looking at close to 50% of these market looking at e-com based transaction, and they are moving into a cashless society. So that's how big the inclusivity has happened in Vietnam specifically. And next slide, please. Going to my home ground, I can talk a lot about India, and that too on digital public infrastructure. It is a flag bearer. IMF recognizes it, endorses it. G20 is trying to copy this, and they try to bring this success story to their local markets. So India boasts probably the second largest network of digital IDs. followed by China, and our own biometric identity platform. I'm just going to throw you some weird numbers. It has got 1.4 billion citizens covered under the scheme. So, and even as early as last year, there were close to 460 million bank accounts were opened. And the interesting part is 56% are now owned by women. So what brings inclusivity is they are empowering both the MSMEs and the women. So I personally have worked with self-help groups where women who are underbanked, who doesn't have inclusiveness in any financial services, they are now independent. This is a huge thing. I know most of the audiences here are predominantly from US or Europe or in the APAC side, but the context here is empowering women is a common success story across Africa and India. And just to give you an idea that what has happened with the MSME segment, more specifically, is close to 50% of the sales is happening via UPI, and that has been forecasted to happen in the next 2 years. And the rural or the tier 3, tier 4 cities, as we call here, 90% of the retailers are ready to do digital transactions. So they are shifting from a cash-based society to a wallet-based society. So what has happened now is this is now open the floor for all the credit card companies. Now UPI is working on a pre-approved credit line. So what it means is you can give access to all these underserved, underbanked, consumers in the tier 3 cities. They get access to this. And how it is going to happen is the credit worthiness is based purely on their online transaction in UPI, which is a huge game changer in the BOP markets. That is the bottom of the pyramid market. So I can go on about India's DPI story. So I'll leave it at that. The only thing I can leave you is this. It has been a success story, and India is a flag bearer for DPI. And the next few years, it is going to be their economic growth is purely based upon both NPCIs, UPI, and the DPI. Handing over back to Lindsay.
Perfect. Wow, everyone. Really rich information. Very deep overview there of the region, and it just shows how knowledgeable you all are in your respective areas. So thank you so much. I want to, before we get to our wrap up, I want to just remind everyone we will have a few minutes for questions. So go ahead and pop those in the panel at the bottom. We already have some great questions coming in from you all. I want to go back to your comment, Tonette, which is not unimportant, right? Your comment about the Southeast Asia countries having their own sports leagues and competitions, because I find that to be curious and really aligned, because in one of our other sessions in EMEA, the topic came up about national payments and national pride, and how these regional blocks are emerging in a way out of national pride, not being dependent on other players, on Western-based banks or networks or regulators, and really being able to have autonomy and based around their own cultural behaviors and infrastructure and regulation. And I'm just wondering, Tonette and Mahesh, to what extent do you think cultural pride is having an impact in the development of these systems?
Well, for me, it's massive, right? Because I think if you look also at the size, for example, just talking about Southeast Asia, these countries have always been the smaller brothers of everyone else, right? Everyone else was always developed. Everyone else was always larger. And the Southeast Asia bloc was really because geographically they're very near each other. And in a way, you're almost at that point where you're like so small compared to everyone else, but if you're together as a block, you almost create this block now of strength. So I think, especially for countries that are smaller, that they have to band together almost, right? Think of it as a classroom, right? Where you have these big bullies and you have these smaller kids that are trying to band together to create some strength. I think that pride of being in that cluster is really important as we go and figure out where the development is going to happen. And more than that, Lindsay, is really how do we learn from each other, right? There's a lot of like learning from each other that you're trying to do with your partners, because at the end of the day, everyone's competing against everybody, right? Everyone's trying to get the exports. Everyone's trying to be the import haven. Everyone's trying to be the call center of the world. Everyone's trying to produce their own goods with their own resources, right? So I think because you all have to compete with one another and you have to compete in this very global space where before you were just competing against Asians, but now you're competing against people from Europe, from Latin America, from North America. Then now you have to band together even more. So I think it plays a very big part.
Fantastic.
Yeah, adding on to that, I have one point. I had a friend of mine who was traveling, as you guys were giving us a use case. He traveled to Dubai, and in the airport, he could buy a coffee using UPI. And he made a video, like what Tonit made a video. He sent a video. It is a commonality. It is like loyalty towards your country. And you say like, hey, I bought a coffee in an airport in a foreign land. And that makes them a big pride. I mean, we may not be good at football. That's kind of a loyalty club we are in, right? So that's purely from a consumer behavior perspective. So you trying to attach yourself to some brand.
Yes, I think the importance of branding is so underappreciated in payments, but branding is extremely powerful. And a lot of times the RTPs around the world that aren't scaling as rapidly as others, there might be a branding issue where brand is not present. There's no identity. There's no cultural aspect to it. The consumer doesn't feel anything when they're paying with that payment method. So, we talk so much about the technology, but a lot of times I just wanted to acknowledge sometimes that cultural and human element, which a lot of times is the determining factor.
Yep.
So let's go to the next slide. We just have kind of 2 more slides here to drive home what we've been learning about. We had a wealth of information shared. And so what does this all mean, right? What's the sense we can make out of this? And we want to leave you with a couple of big take homes, okay? So we've repeated over and over the importance of wallets, the importance of RTPs or A2A payments are growing exponentially. So far, cards are holding steady mostly with some slow decline, especially in debit, okay? But as we look to the future trend, we're going to see wallets and RTPs continue to grow, cards continue to decline, really kind of remaining the domain of the affluent and cross-border travel. And so that's kind of how we see this competitive environment unfolding in the short and medium term. Okay. Now, with that fact, that presents a challenge to the industry because wallets and RTPs are low-cost payment methods or zero-cost payment methods. And so what's essentially happening is revenue is getting extracted out of the payments industry. And so the whole industry is facing this challenge of monetization. What's the next evolution of monetization? So we're going to be starting to see next generation of verticalized industry-specific value-added services. This is inevitable. This has to occur in order for the private sector, right, to stay active in the industry. It's already happening, and we'll continue to see this happening more and more. Same thing is happening in cross-border, although not as rapidly. It's going to take longer. But again, moving towards immediacy and cost efficiency. Just like in domestic payments, business model innovation is going to be required in an increasingly interoperable, low-cost environment. And as SWIFT starts to see increasing number of competitors and challengers, those costs are going to keep going down. Players, banks, fintechs, wallets of all kinds are going to have to find new ways of making money. And increasingly, I said this in all of the regions, but in Asia, it's most prominent that payments are really trending towards becoming a customer acquisition cost. And the revenue is going to come from data analytics, from data expertise, and value-added services. Okay. That being said, small business is still a hugely under-penetrated opportunity where we see payment digitization and other types of services, fraud services, reconciliation services, back-end services that SMEs need, and today are largely underserved. So that's a huge opportunity where we can expect a lot of increasing innovation. And then finally, and we have a great question about this, which I'm happy to see. One thing we really did not touch on, but of course is essential that we keep in our minds is the issue of fraud and the issue of security when it comes to moving into many of these payment rails, which are brand new in many cases. And so we can see, given that, we can see increased fraud and an increased investment in biometrics, in AI, in identity solutions, portable identity, possibly based on government-led digital identity projects. That's going to be a big investment and innovation area to come, where we're going to need these solutions. And there'll be a lot of experimentation and ways to compete and develop new services to stay vibrant in this market that's changing so rapidly. Okay. So before I get to my final slide, I want to go to the question that was asked in related to fraud. I think Nacho, you wanted to answer that question.
Yes. Alicia Davalos asked if there are relevant information on fraud events or fraud trends from RTPs or cross-border RTPs. There is a lot, and not only use cases, but also best practices. You, Lynn, have recently mentioned some of them. The most part are around, of course, the education of customers and employees, but also to monitor the incoming and outgoing transactions using, for instance, setting transaction limits, or using machine learning or AI in order to prevent that fraud or create internal watch list. We will be very happy to share with anyone that want to continue this conversation about fraud on RTPs and cross-border RTPs payment, and we can share more information by email if you are interested.
Okay,
and probably
terrific.
it's just a little addition on that. The fraud issue is an issue for RTP because RTPs mostly around the world are final and irrevocable, right? So and when they're final and irrevocable, you're not dealing with chargebacks now of cards, right? Where you can dispute it 1 month later, 2 months later.
Right.
Here, the money is gone, and it's gone in a few seconds. So obviously, as Nacho said, the AI will have to be very strong there. Fraud mechanisms, limits, and that's why even RTPs around the world, you will see them starting with small limits, and then they slowly grow up. They slowly go up in terms of value as they see less and less frauds. But it's an amazing question because it's something that will need a whole webinar too to talk about how fraud will be eradicated or like at least minimized because of these very quick systems.
Yeah,
and a big.
So I just wanted to, in terms of that, is that as Tonet said, the fact that they are not reversible payments, of course, it increased this problem. In the most cases, they are the acquirers and the different payment actors are creating agreement and bilateral, agreements in terms to who will pay in case that there is fraud or something like that. No, so it is a great question. Just wanted to highlight that.
Awesome, and I think kind of related. We're getting a couple more questions here. On this question of branding, that's what I imagine it's related to. But the question is, among the countries that have had fast adoption of digital payments, are there effective nationwide campaigns that can be shared to promote trust in new systems? Who would like to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, I can go about that because every now and then UPI comes with a literature on educating the market on how to utilize it, because there have been pockets wherein the internet is bad, they don't have connectivity, they don't have the right mobile applications. So a nationwide campaign is the must if you're trying to do anything on RTP or anything on transaction or digital payments. So I can go out and say like NCPI, that is the Payments Council of India, utilizes at least 30 to 40% of the budget just in advertising and educating the masses on how to utilize this. So I can give an example wherein there is something called an UPI Lite, wherein you can just transact using an SMS. And that needs to be educated to the tier 2 or tier 4 cities. So a mass campaign is the must if you're trying to do RTP transactions.
Perfect. Anything to add there, Tonet?
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, more than the campaign, what's really critical to look at a country that is successful on any new digital payment type is to understand why it was successful, right? There's always the merchant and the consumer who both have the benefit. I think around the world, if you look at RTP systems that have gone live that are not, making good, it's because there's no benefit to the merchant or no benefit to the user, right? Every country that has a good traction of this, the benefit is very strong for the merchant and the user. And then the marketing campaigns happen. I'm from the Philippines, and I sent this to Lindsay a while ago. I think, when I landed in my country, there was like big sign of GCash, which is the mobile wallet here, saying being accepted in Japan. And as you travel across different markets in Asia, you will see Alipay scattered all over the airport, right? All over the airport, you'll see Alipay everywhere. So I think there is a great budget that has to be given in terms of making sure that people are aware of this. But at the same time, there has to be a strong domestic usage already that is coupled with like a good user interface, with a good benefit for the user and a good benefit for the merchant. I think the merchant is the one that is usually forgotten. Everyone just loves to talk about technology, how the RTP system is, but there's not a lot of talk about what's better for the user and what's better for the merchant, right? And then campaign on that ground, not campaign that it's now live, right? It's campaign on why it's good, right?
Fantastic.
May
I'm gonna.
So
yes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, this is a fascinating question, and well, we work really hard helping our clients in this sense. But just to give you an idea, again, there are more than 65 countries that have a national financial inclusion strategy. This financial inclusion strategy, which are public commitments in terms to promote financial inclusion, after 2017, all of them switched to digital campaigns and digital promotion. But something that we have learned after the pandemic, and mainly I might say with the RTPs revolution, is that there are not campaigns as good as a good product, and even when it is public. So for instance, if we go to UPI, or if we go in Latin America to PIX in Brazil, where the government did a huge campaign to put the name PIX in the mind of the merchants and the customer, and they have done, they have achieved and break all their objectives by far. So there are campaigns from both sides, public and private sector, but for sure the product incentives is what the experience have shown be much more effective at the end of the day.
Perfect. Terrific. Well, we're just about out of time. I want to go to our very last slide here and just do a quick, we started with the tour around the region. We're going to end with the tour around the region. With so much information, so much diversity, it can be hard to understand, get a one final takeaway for this region. So we've just kind of mapped here, what is the best market for particular payments verticals, right? And this is kind of our opinion. Our opinion is changing constantly. However, to help guide us a little bit, right? If you're in the small business digitization business, right? You're serving small business. Your biggest and best opportunity today is going to be in India and China because of its sheer size and the levels of underpenetrated nature of small businesses in those markets. Okay, Japan is going to be our best market for loyalty-driven card issuing as a service, banking as a service, getting more innovative issuers out there to promote card issuing, since we have a very large acceptance network, but also at the same time a very high use of cash. Okay, Korea, very mature RTP system, which has been in place for 20 years, will be our best market for value-added services for RTPs. Thailand and Vietnam are very attractive for cross-border e-commerce, especially for fintechs that enable connectivity to local payment methods and alternative payment methods because of their deep penetration of wallets and kind of underbanked population that maybe can't access credit cards. Singapore and Hong Kong, ideal locations for innovative B2B solutions because of their liquidity, treasury centers, huge corporate headquarters in the region. And then finally, Australia, it's an advanced market. It's difficult to innovate there because things are very advanced. So embedded payments and everything that's a little bit cutting edge on seamless, embedded, invisible, completely transparent payments are going to be Australia's going to be a great testing ground for that type of innovation. Okay, so hopefully that's a fun little exercise just to wrap us up. So I want to just go to our final slide and we'll see all of our speakers and our contact information. I want to thank all of you for participating, for being online with us today. You will receive the deck and the recording in your email in the next 48 hours, so stay tuned for that. And Tonet, Mahesh, Ignacio, thank you all very much for sharing with us and your expertise. And we really look forward to more conversations and learning from you all as well going forward. Have a great rest of your day ahead.